Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Trial by Podcast. I'm joined by Jason today to discuss a new, exciting, and very relevant topic at the moment, which is doping or anti-doping, depends on what side you fall. It's recently come into light
In
with
sport,
in sport. It's recently come into light with the enhanced games, which basically another form of Olympics where athletes are given free reign to basically take any performance enhancing drug that they want in an attempt to break a world record. And funnily enough, one of Australia's biggest athletes, which is James Magnussen, who, as some of you might know, is a decorated Olympic swimmer, won several medals for Australia. And he jokingly one day went on, it might have been a podcast, or it could have been a radio
I think it
show.
was a podcast.
Yeah,
I think
something
it was a
like
podcast.
that. And he joked that if he was paid $1 million, he would take performance enhancing drugs to break a world record. And someone caught on to the idea. I think he's Australian, I believe.
Yeah, he's Australian. His name is Aaron DeZoza.
Yeah.
So he's an Australian. He used to be a lawyer, actually.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But he's turned into the business venture side of things now. But
Yeah.
yeah, he's Australian and he came up with it.
Yeah.
Got funding from the Donald Trump Jr., in fact, is the biggest investor in the enhanced games, and the CEO of PayPal. And I'm pretty sure there are a few other smaller Australian investors, just even globally. But it's happening there in LA.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I think the prize now is for any athlete that competes and breaks a world record, it's $1 million.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a few differing opinions about it. I think most of the sporting community is on the anti-doping side, which is the concerns with health risks and everything else. And then there's the other side of the coin, which is, yeah, this is great. Why don't we test the bounds of what a human can achieve? And that's what we're going to get into today. So looking into both sides of the coin and have a little bit of a for and against kind of vibe. But
Yeah. Just on the legal note, I think in New South Wales, it's still illegal to have any sort of steroids. It's under the Drug Misuse and Trafficking Act in 1985, and just like the other recreational drugs you may have, which is illegal, steroids still fall under the same umbrella in the schedule. And Australia as a whole is governed by Sport Integrity Australia. They have been the body that always keeps up with the sporting code internationally, and it's WADA. Do you know the full form?
Yeah, World Anti-Doping Agency.
Yeah, so they were founded in 2004, and they're basically the international body for all regulations in the sport. And a lot of the countries adopted their framework for their own national codes when it came to what's illegal in sporting, what is anti-doping, what drugs are classified as performing enhancing. So Australia also does follow that code a lot, similar to Canada and the UK. The US has their own statutory legislation. Russia is a bit unknown. They don't have a formal one, but I think they have always been kind of involved in the anti-doping scandals, and they've always been a bit wary in that sense. But in Sport Integrity Australia actually did make a statement on the enhanced games. The CEO, Dr. Sarah Benson, said, and I quote, "We work to ensure that sport is safe and fair for all. The enhanced games is promoting the complete opposite and poses a significant risk to athlete health and safety while undermining the fundamental values of sport in Australia." And they condemn that the competition that promotes drug use in sport is incorrect, and they were saying how it's basically just another financial means of exploiting athletes. And I think it also gives a message to younger athletes growing up in Australia and around the world that in the future you have to take performing enhancing drugs to break world records. But obviously we can get more into that. So yeah, what do you think about anti-doping in general, and what's your say?
Yeah, it's a bit of a interesting conundrum. I think it's happening anyway as well. So that's one side of the coin where I'm sure there's a lot of drug use, PED use. I know a lot of athletes would use PEDs for recovery after injury and stuff like that. But in terms of my biggest concern with it is definitely the health side of things. We do know there is a lot of research on the effects of anabolic steroids and everything else out there that people are using, but just, I guess, almost advocating with the enhanced games to use it without, I guess, adequate education about the effects of it is what is really concerning me. Like, if you've seen a video of James Magnussen recently, he looks like a completely different person.
Yeah.
And that is scary because who knows what could happen to him. And that is an athlete that's at the peak physical condition that a human could be. So in theory, he should be living a very long and healthy life. But now we don't know.
Yeah, I think the opposite side of that is, and I'm taking these examples from the founder of the Enhanced Games, for example. He had a inauguration speech in LA, and he was talking about the Enhanced Games, and one of the points he said was that he wants biology and science to be not the ceiling but the baseline for the future. And he was alluding to the fact that these performing enhancing drugs are to be seen as not illegal but an alternative path of becoming better at what your art, which is sport for a lot of people. So the only reason why it's not being taken right now, amongst the health risks, obviously, but if it was to be regulated properly, studied more, and deemed no significant long-term health risk, or short-term ideally, would be just another tool for athletes to incorporate into their program. So if you're working out in the gym, if you have a nutritionist, you're eating well, the performing enhancing drug treatments is just another tool that they would have for in their entire training program. So that's when they're saying that it's already happening and we don't even know about it. So for example, Lance Armstrong, he was only found years later, and then 6 or 7 titles of World Tour de France, I think, was stripped from him. And there's lots of examples where athletes were only found to be tested positive after the event. So the argument, a lot of the proponents of PEDs are the fact that it's already happening, and there are many people who've gone away with it technically. But if it was legalized everywhere, then we could have a proper fair playing. Because to be honest, we don't actually know how many of the current athletes are taking performance-enhancing drugs that aren't still detectable because their science or their biology is better than what the test can produce, or sorry, the right word is not produce, but can find in their testing program. So I feel like their main point is that it creates a level playing field if it is made legal for everyone.
Yeah. And tied to that, I think also with WADA, with the World Anti-Doping Agency that we discussed, they have a list of prohibited drugs, and that updates every year actually. So to that point, it's like their science is developing so quickly, you don't even know actually. Maybe someone is taking something that is currently not illegal.
Yeah, exactly.
But it could be illegal in the future, and then what happens then? There's all those things. But I think the point you brought up about fairness is another thing that worries me as well about the sport. It's, for me personally, like, sport is somewhere where you test your capabilities against someone. And with PEDs, I feel like it creates somewhat of an unfair playing field. Like, I understand that, there's a nutrition aspect and you could almost incorporate it into your diet, training, nutrition, and make it part of that whole scheme. But one athlete could have a system that is better than another athlete with PEDs compared to another athlete. So I think the difference is you could have, even as a natural athlete, there is that unfair playing field could exist where someone just has a better system, better trainer, whatever it is. But it's fair because everyone has access to the same things. Whereas in PEDs, you don't know. Someone could be using something that someone else doesn't have access to, and then it creates this weird, almost unfair playing field. But then also in certain sports, like the one example that I think where it's highly relevant is combat sports, where you've got 2 athletes that are putting literally their lives on the line to compete. And we've seen it before, like boxing and MMA and all these sports where people have come out with life-threatening injuries. And yeah, just I wanted to know your stance on that, because what happens if, due to PED use, one athlete, is so strong and so like peak performance that they actually critically injure someone?
Yeah, I think then the key is that if we are going to be using PEDs, then it has to be regulated and the same for everyone.
Mhm.
Whereas then the argument of one person having better PEDs would not be relevant, because if both people in that fighting cage or that boxing ring were to receive the exact same drug, then it goes back to my point where it's just another incorporation into their overall training program, and it goes back to the individual of how they train. The science behind it is obviously new. It's been around since the 1980s, actually, but it's not been implemented in such a large scale where everyone knows about it. So I think there are definitely health risks, and we're not shying away from that. But I think what's going to happen is, for example, with the enhanced games, because this is the first time, there is a kind of niche forming from a lot of people, mostly men, I'd say, that is looking at how far we can stretch our bodies beyond natural science. So I remember a year or 2 years ago, I think there was also someone who wanted to see if they could freeze their body and then live longer, and look at that like lifelong immunity, and that got viral. I think it's another version of the enhanced games, another version of it, because at the end of the day, it is still financial. There's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of investments involved, and I think it is another playing field. So that means that when these games go on, it's been planned for 4 days with race tracks, lifting, and swimming, 50, 100 meters, and I think butterfly. And those 4 days, like every other sport now, it's going to be such a financial game because there's going to be lots of betting that goes on. So I think there's another aspect of that is a financial one. But in their inauguration, Andrew De Zoysa was also talking about the fact that it's probably going to be athletes who join this program would and do use these PEDs will never be able to go back into the normal elite athlete sport. So if you take performing enhancing drugs for the enhanced games, you can't go back in the Olympics.
Yep.
So we're looking at that kind of area where they've just retired or they've just stepped out of professional sports, but they've still got enough in them to train hard and then go on for that record. Or it would be people who are kind of are good at their sport, but not gonna, like the fifth, sixth, mid-table, kind of not gonna get their top three medals. That's another financial incentive for them, because that's way more money they could earn by joining this enhanced games than they would in the Olympics. So it's a lot of financial incentive as well. And I think, lastly, one of the strongest 4 points for this is that it does come down to body autonomy and self-determination and rights for the person to do whatever they want to do. So if there's an athlete that agrees to use performance enhancing drugs, and the enhanced games provides the opportunity, and they've made it very clear, they're not hiding anything, they've come out, they've told people well in advance, then I think they should have the right to do what they want to do. If that's their choice, it's their choice. And I think that's even though it's frowned upon because of the risk involved, I do think they still have the right to both self-determination, as Andrew De Zoysa puts it in his speech, actually.
I think a point that that I would raise about that is what are your thoughts on like the exploitation? Like you mentioned that money is involved. So when money is involved, I guess the best decision-making process is probably not in place from a health perspective. So you're offering athletes money, and then there's gambling money, and there's all these, lucrative incentives for people to be involved in these games. But does that kind of create a culture of, okay, for purposes of money, doing something that is potentially life-threatening is okay?
Yeah, it's one of those things where there's a lot of industries or one-offs events that people just join in that is so frowned upon. I don't think I can give examples for various reasons, but I think there's a lot of events that are one-off things that people do for money, even though it's seen as negative in society. But again, it's no one's coercing them or no one's forcing them. It's their choice, and they're making an active effort to choose to go down that path. So I feel like the best solution would be that if the enhanced games is existing and it is going to go ahead, it's just the 4 days. If the athletes are going to be joining it no matter what, then it should just be treated as a different event. Like how technically, if you really look back, when the UFC started, it was seen as a massive negative conception in society. Like the people were saying, how could you let people get into a cage and fight without rules, no gear, you can use legs, hands. It was out of norm, right? I think something similar is happening now with the enhanced games, where it's seen as such a left like road or step away from society's norms, that people are again going on online and being like, oh, it's not right, it's not good. And they're all very valid points, the same way they had when the MMA started. But the MMA was seen again as just a different standalone event that was, you want to watch it, you watch it, you want to take part, you take part. And then it grew for various reasons. But I feel like if the enhanced game's going to exist, and it should exist as a separate event, and the records that they get should then be only kept for them and not interfere with the actual sporting regulations internationally that already exist.
Right. I think another like point, which I think for against like why we shouldn't do this, is also from a youth perspective. If we're advocating, okay, use performance enhancing drugs and break world records and stuff like that, how are we kind of telling our youths that this is what you need to do now to be a top athlete? You need to use performance enhancing drugs to break world records. And like tying back to the legal side of things, in Australia, it's still illegal to possess and administer steroids. So I guess it creates a bit of a weird mindset for youths. Like, we're encouraging people to take part in sport and do the best they can. And, Australia's always been a good Olympic competing country for such a small population. Are we now saying, okay, it's fine, like use performance enhancing drugs, really see where your ceiling is at? So I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think that has to be agreed upon by anyone. I feel like it does send a message to younger athletes. I think that's when bodies like Sport Integrity Australia really come into play, by making statements and making regulations and enforcing, educating the younger generations to remind them that it's separate, it's different. If you go on that path, it's a very different path, and you won't be able to compete in Olympics, because the Olympics have so much history. There's so much competition. There's so much patriotism and nationalism that comes with it as well. And I think the enhanced games is so far away from that. So I think the AIS has to really be involved in making sure the generations and the younger sports in schools, even universities, college level, are all properly reminded that it is still illegal in Australia and the law isn't going to change, and that's their position. I think they should stick with it.
Yeah, I think one thing that we can both agree on is, I think if this is to go ahead and become a big, large-scale event, there needs to be a lot of education in terms of the risks involved. Also, we need a lot more medical support, research and testing and all of those things, just to make sure that health is at the forefront and not money. Because I think that's where the line's getting blurred, where we're seeing the money side of things in a very lucrative industry, but then also the health risks. So if we do strike a balance and manage to educate people that this is potentially the risk that you could face, and this is what you can do about it, you like choose not to partake or do X, Y, and Z, then I think that's something that it could work.
Yeah, I agree. I think right now the enhanced games has always put forward the idea that there's going to be heavily regulated. It's going to be observed by professional health professionals. It's going to be monitored, and yeah, I think they really need to highlight that if they want to continue this. I think it's only a 4-day event. It's its first ever. It's next year. There's a lot of time from now and next year as well to see what's going to happen, to see what other governments say, if they're going to allow. I'm pretty sure another thing you would consider is that an athlete technically would not be allowed by their nation to go compete in enhanced games, because, or with the condition that if they leave, they can't come back. Because, similarly in Australia, if you're playing for the Australian national team in whatever sport, you sometimes have conditions where you can't play for, recreational purposes because of the injury aspect. They want to keep you healthy, or you can't even play for clubs sometimes during the period of training for the national team. So I think there's a lot of law that's left to go in here. There's a lot of regulation that's needed, a lot of education that's needed. And I think that Australia would and the AIS, like I said, we really need to step up and make sure that they're putting forward the right regulations and media statements like they have already, condemning them and making sure that their youth and their athletes are protected going forward.
Yeah. And then I think, just to sum it up, I think there's a lot of work to do. The enhanced games are good in terms of bringing this to light and saying, okay, what are we going to do about this and how are we going to maintain health and integrity of sport and all that. But yeah, long way to go. I think there's a lot of debate that's going to continue, and we need to really flesh out, okay, what is our stance? How are we going to educate? How are we going to promote this or not promote it? And figure out what we're going to do as a sporting nation.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see what science says about it. I think when I say science, I mean the community of scientists, because if you're very pro science, if that's the right term, you'd want to see how the body can evolutionize and get better even beyond aspects of without the performance enhancing drugs. And I think it'll be really interesting to see what that community says against the other communities around. And yeah, I think it's going to be a very centered debate over from now until the games happen next year.
Yep.
So yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, cool. Well, we'll leave it to the audience to think about it as well. And yeah, thank you for tuning in today and see you on the next one.